give us an example of what it looks like to offer unconditional welcome to a part of you. What does it look like?
I can tell you a part of me. Oh, so hard because you don't want to expose too many people too often, but I'll just say there's a part that I only recognize my parts in other people typically. Okay. So here's how this works for me. Like whenever I'm triggered by someone else's behavior, our first go-to is to what's wrong with them, right?
Mm.
But the real question is, why am I triggered? They're just being them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just doing whatever it is they do. And why is it that I'm triggered and I can't love them with unconditional welcome? Why can't I? So for me, it always shows up in someone else first. So I see something in someone else that I'm like, ew, that's yuck. And so when I'm doing my work, when I'm conscious of that, I go immediately back and say, like say we talked about this yesterday on the phone, and we don't have to mention any names or any details, but the part of me that I did not like was sneaky.
Yeah.
So I saw sneaky in somebody else. And my first response was to scold and to correct and to shame, essentially, right? But I kept my mouth shut for once, or maybe I've done it a few times, but it's not easy. And I thought to myself, how am I sneaky? And how do I treat my sneaky? And I thought, yeah, when Kyle makes cookies, sometimes I pretend I only ate one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might have ate two.
Oh yeah.
And or I remember a lot as a kid sneaking into the pantry and eating things that, I knew, even if my mom didn't say I couldn't have. Like I didn't want just one Oreo, I wanted 5.
Yeah.
And so I was going to eat 5 Oreos sneaky. You know what I mean? Like who wants to eat 5 Oreos in front of people? Still to this day, I don't.
Yeah.
So I guess I began to think about myself, and then I said, oh, okay. Now the next question is, well, why was I sneaky? And then the answer to that was shame.
Yeah.
I feel shame. So why is this person being sneaky? They must feel shame. And that instantly changes my perception of their sneaky.
Yeah.
From something that has a lot of compassion, from something that had a lot of judgment, to something that has a lot of compassion, which ultimately changes relationships.
Yes.
And I love that. And I just wish it was as easy as you and I talking on this camera. It's just not.
Well, that was my next question. So for you made that sound very linear, right? But for someone who this idea is new, it give yourself grace, right? What I'm hearing you say is the first thing is just be aware. You may not get the answer. So if someone does something that triggers you, you're saying go inside and ask, what's got me feeling this way? It's not going to automatically diffuse you in that moment. But if you keep leaning into that, I think you and I have discovered you're going to get the answers, but it takes work.
Takes time. Yeah. And it might take just keeping your mouth closed until you have time alone to process it. I think the key is to remember other people are our mirrors, and we won't see anything in someone else that's not in ourselves. It's impossible to see something, and even beauty. Even when I look at my grandbaby and he looks back at me, and Kyle says, he just like looks with wonder at you. And I said, that's because he sees wonder in me.
Yeah.
And I look at him with wonder because I have wonder, like he sees what I'm reflecting to him. And it's so beautiful in that way. So it's the good and the bad.
Yeah.
The light and the dark. This works for everyone. You see in me things about you that you love. And that's why you love me. And you also see in me about, things in me that you don't necessarily love. And that's why you might like, sometimes with me, and you don't really, but I mean, you don't tell me if you do, but anyway, I think it's a good thing to remember. And, at the retreat, that's our goal. Our goal is to invite people by loving them. No shoulding at our retreat. We don't should on ourselves at the retreat.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in our culture, people think, oh, well, I'm showing that I love you and care about you by trying to fix you. And I'm going to give you all the advice. And I think something that we're learning is to really tend to it like maybe a midwife, right? A midwife is not going to load you up with drugs. She's not going to bring all the instruments to try to fix you or to speed things along. She's going to meet the mom where she is, and she's going to remind her, she's going to empower her. Like, you were created to do this. Yeah. Millions and billions of women have gone before you, and I am here and I'm staying present with you in the pain. Yeah. Right? I'm not going to relieve you from the pain with tons of whatever it is that I can inject into you. And so that's something that I've learned, because I'm a fixer. And I really am in this season of life learning to meet people and allowing things like silence, powerful questions, to do some of the heavy lifting without feeling the need to fix. One thing you said in the intentions that you wrote was trusting the inner wisdom of the person. And that may not show up right at that second.
No. Dysregulated people, they don't have the capacity to get to their frontal lobe here, because they can't get up here to the executive functioning brain because they're dysregulated. So we can't find our wisdom typically when we're dysregulated, or when we haven't become aware of it, right? But it's a practice.
Yeah.
Like yoga that we do at the retreat. It's always a practice. Yeah. I think this has been, Natul, I was sitting here listening to us and thinking, it is a beautiful space, and it's a rare space, because I don't take time out to go. I mean, this is a lot of work for a time out. I could just go do this any old time, but we don't. You know what I'm saying? Like,
how about someone who is coming to the retreat and is listening to this and really can't even find it in herself to give unconditional welcome to her spouse? Where does a person like that begin this journey?
I mean, it always begins inside. It always begins. Maybe where they begin is to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
That anytime we're suffering, and we're looking outside of ourselves, we're really powerless. Yeah. I mean, trauma is not really an event, but it is a feeling of powerlessness in our bodies about an event. And it's the same. We can't heal that without getting power, owning our power. And so the same in relationships, and I am a big talker and can tell you tomorrow that I'm struggling in this same area. But it is hard to take the focus off another and put it back on ourselves, because that's just looks so easy to fix. Like, if you just stop talking like that, you and I will be fine. But the truth is, I can't stop someone else from talking a certain way or acting a certain way or being a certain way. I can only change how I welcome. Here we go, all the way back around. How I welcome that person. And I encourage people to watch that TEDx talk, because she does a beautiful job of saying this, but it really helped me. And then, that's a concept that I threw out to you in thinking about the podcast. And then there's parts of us, there's parts of ourselves that we don't offer unconditional welcome. And I think that we're going to touch on a lot of that at the retreat, but why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think it all happened at a time where we were trying to be super intentional about making the retreat the most welcoming place a woman has ever walked into, right? I mean, that's not an exaggeration. We didn't want a woman to walk in and see all these other women and not feel included. You know, I mean, how many of us have felt that, right? Walking into a room with a bunch of women can be very intimidating. In fact, it's one of the things that makes me like go back to my high school days. You know, when you're walking into the cafeteria and you don't exactly know where you're going to sit. I mean, I remember I was invited to speak at a conference and I walked in, and as I was walking in, I was like, I have done harder things than this. And why do I feel so puny before I walk into this room full of women? And I didn't want people to experience that at this retreat. And so I really wanted to be intentional about that. And so I think we started talking about, well, what does that look like? Well, let's welcome women when they come in. Let's really listen to them. Let's lean in. We were doing all these housekeeping things, right? But then I read a book that was recommended to me, and I have it right here, called A Hidden Wholeness, by Parker Palmer. And he bases, the tagline is welcoming the soul and weaving community in a wounded world. And his whole idea is about creating a space that welcomes our souls. This world doesn't create that space for us, right? There's always an agenda. There's a lot of busyness. There's a lot of noise. And Parker Palmer talks about the soul as he compares it to a wild animal in the forest. And if you want to take a peek at a wild animal, you can't just go be like, hey, wild animal, come out here. You know, what do? You're quiet. You sit down at the edge, you know, maybe beside a tree, and you wait and you listen and you pay attention. And so creating that kind of space isn't easy to do. It takes a lot of intentionality. You came up, you called it our intention, and you came up with beautiful words of, it is our intention to not fix you, you know, to lean in, to allow silence to do some of the heavy lifting. And I can post it here after we post this video. So we were talking about that. So I was very outwardly focused, but you are the one who brought it to my attention, is how can we welcome others if we can't even welcome ourselves, all the parts of ourselves? And that's what's like, yeah. And I think that's what you were experiencing with your daughter.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, because I don't have a lot of compassion for the parts of me that are dramatic or that are angry or selfish or mean, or, you know, those parts of me, like, were not welcomed as a little one. And that doesn't even say anything to my parents, because most people have a really hard time welcoming any sort of negative, you know, emotion anytime, really. You know, we are okay with sad, you know, especially if we see a valid reason. But we're not really okay with much more than that in the negative space. And so, you know, I'm really struggle with that. And so people in our lives, they show up with these things, and because we haven't learned to have compassion for ourselves in those areas, we have a really hard time having compassion for them. And we can fake it for a little while, but when, especially when someone, you know, lives in your home and sleeps in your bed, maybe, you know, that's really hard. You and I and Alicia and Mary, we talk about this a lot, but we are learning to embrace all the parts of ourselves with unconditional welcome. And that gives us, more capacity to do that for others, because when that shows up in others, we're able to say, oh, it's just a part of you. And so, you know, I love that. I love that work, and I hate that work at the same time.
For sure. Part of unconditional welcome for me is you don't try to fix the other person. And that's problem number one. We always have an agenda for people. And And it could be a beautiful thing to have a vision for the potential of that person, but it's not our job to change them.
Right.
And so for me, it's been trusting the journey. God, Ruby is your daughter.
Yeah.
My job is to love her and provide boundaries and to be present for her, but to continue to try to change her or to, really modify behaviors does nothing for our relationship and
Right.
for my own self-esteem
Right.
as a mom.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. And this is not easy work at all, especially with people that you really love and you really have like, it's one thing to do this for the grumpy, cashier at HEB. Like, okay, yeah, give me, here's your money, smile. You know what? I hope you have a great day. Right. But then when that person is like, all up in my business all day long, like,
Yeah.
so it's hard work. It's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm the one suffering when I don't do the work.
Yeah.
And there's no way out but through. That's it. As long as we're pointing to them, we're really stuck. We're dead in the water, really.
Yeah. By the way, the name is, and I'll post it, it's Karen Faith. And the name of the TEDx talk is How to Talk to the Worst Parts of Yourself.
Yeah.
And she mentions the word unconditional welcome, which really aligned with what you and I were trying to put a name to. So it was really, really helpful. I do want to say this, just personally speaking, nothing triggers me like my husband. I can show up real strong in many situations, but with him, he sees, right, the ugliest parts of me, the most vulnerable parts of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I, Enneagram 8, always just thought, well, I need to fix him. He needs to come further along, right? And here we are 25 years into this, and he's not exactly what I want him to be, And what I realized is that I was scared. I was scared of who I am when I'm with him and who I'm not, who I wanted to be and who I didn't end up being. And I've had to do a lot of work, and it's a scary place to be, to go first.
Mm-hmm.
But something happens when you go first and you start welcoming those parts, that the person who is your deepest and most intimate partner wants to reciprocate, and they want to do the work alongside. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be true for everyone, but I have seen it. I have seen the fruit of the work that I am doing. And my husband, he's amazing, right? But he's like, and I'm seeing those walls come down, and I'm seeing, just the sweetness of our relationship blossoming. And I guess that's what I would want other women, encourage them to be first. Be the first to welcome yourself, welcome your spouse. And if you keep doing the work, you're going to see fruit of it. And of course, I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're out of time. I do have a story I could end it with if you want the kind of a quick one. We call it, Kyle and I call it the guacamole story. And, sometimes you do need a guide. You do need a coach, and you're a coach. And I know you're going to be like, you're amazing to help people. But we had a coach for many years. His name was Jim. And years ago, I was just off my rocker one day. Like I even knew I was the problem. It was like, okay, I just couldn't stop it. My friend Star calls it going dark. I had gone dark. I was in a dark place, and poor Kyle was trying everything, and he just I wasn't having it. And I locked myself in my room, and he had an appointment with our coach, Jim, that day. And so he went to the coach, and he was so mad. He was so mad. He was like, she's, and he just rattled off, whatever I wasn't there, but he just went on and
you can imagine.
Yeah. And in Jim's style, Jim, just sat back with this most compassionate look on his face for Kyle. And he said, oh, Kyle, I see you. I understand. I see you. And he said it, very authentically. And Kyle's like, what do I do? What do you see? And Jim said, I see you're having a hard time loving your wife. And And boy, Kyle, that made Kyle mad. He's like, what are you, but he knew exactly what that meant. And he's like, I don't know. He tussled around with it for a little while. And then he just got up. He said, Jim, I got to go home. And he still didn't know what to do. And I was still locked in my bedroom. But when he got home, he went and made me a bowl of homemade guacamole and tortilla chips. And he put it at the door. I didn't let him in, but he put it at the door, and he just knocked on the door, and he just said, I made you something. And of course, I want to know what it is, right? So, instantly it just broke because I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve that. Yeah. And he didn't know how to love me, but he knows I like guacamole.
Oh, yeah.
And so, that's a story that happened probably, at least 15 years ago, but we still call it the guacamole story because it was so powerful. It was like, and I thought just as we were sitting here, like, that's what he was offering me unconditional welcome because I was a mess. I don't know if it was PMS or I don't know what it was, but I was just a mess. I didn't even want to be with
I can just imagine you like opening the door and all Kyle hears like,
oh, he had left. He left them. He knew better than to stand there with it. He wasn't even going to come into my vicinity. He just left it on the floor, but it changed everything.
I love that.
And so it was beautiful. That's unconditional welcome. And it worked, so anyway, I know that we have an intention for that at this retreat and that we are going to create that.
Yeah. And of course, we just, touched on the surface, but I hope that if you took the time to listen to this, that some of this resonated with you. And really what I would hope you take from it is that it does start with you. Welcoming the parts that you've maybe labeled, right? Too big, too small, too sexy.
Not enough.
Not enough. Too much. For me, I tend to go in the area of too much, to this, to that. For others, it's not enough. And so we're asking to lean into that and ask, where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's it?
Thank you, Tara. I love this. This is our first one, hopefully one of many. I look forward to being able to do a live once we hit the 60-day mark on our Facebook page. But we hope you guys were able to catch something here. All right.
Okay.
See you
later, girl.